Hello all, we're going to be going over the upper limb bones. There's this app that I use called the Skeleton 3D. It just helps me visually picture the bones in a 3D manner. So first we'll start off with the clavicle, just right over here. So the clavicle is pretty much your collarbone. Next we'll start with the scapula. So the scapula has a lot of landmarks and I'm gonna go through them all. First, I'll start with the borders. So on top of here, we have the superior border. Down here, on this side, we have the medial border. And over here, we have the lateral border. Next up, we have the superior angle, the inferior angle. And this space here is called the subscapular fossa. And then this little groove here that you see, it's called the scapular notch. And if I were to turn the scapula medial, you'll see this, let me see, cavity here, which is called the glenoid cavity. And then right on top of that is called the coracoid process, and the one next to it is called the Amacrine process. And the Amacrine process stretches out to the spine, which separates the supraspinous fossa from the infraspinous fossa. And yeah, that's pretty much all the landmarks for the scapula. One thing you do have to know about the scapula is you have to determine if it's a left or a right bone. The way I like to visualize it is that the way I'm looking at the bone, so the bone is facing posteriorly for me, meaning that this is the shoulder blade pretty much, that you feel, and then this is where the humerus will connect. So you know that the humerus will be on this side, so you'll know that this will be a right scapula. Hope that helps. That's how I remember it. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about the humerus. Also for the humerus, you also have to differentiate if it's a left or right bone. Again, I'll be going over some landmarks that will maybe help you identify if it's a left or right bone. So on top here we have the head of the humerus, and then right below it we have the greater tubercle of the humerus and the lesser tubercle, and then right in between those two we have the intertubercle groove. And then if we were to turn over just a little bit, you'll see kind of like this rigid area here. This is called the deltoid tuberosity. And then if we go down here, you could pretty much see here that this is the medial condyle, epicondyle. And then up here, we have the lateral epicondyle. And then there's a circle here called the capitellum. And then there's like a rectangle, square looking structure here called the trochlea, I believe. And then if you were to turn it over, this here is called the Amacrine fossa. Excuse me. And then you see these little dots here. Those are called nutrient foramen. That's where blood vessels go into the long bones. And yeah, some common injuries that I like to speak about is a dislocated shoulder. So basically, a dislocated shoulder is when the head of the humerus pretty much and the glenoid cavity of the scapula disarticulate. So pretty much this is no longer attached to the glenoid cavity. That's known as a dislocated shoulder. And a separated shoulder is basically when the clavicle and the omicron process here of the scapula separate, so that's will be a separate shoulder. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and talk about the ulna. So this is the top of the ulna and this is the bottom of the ulna. The way I like to remember is that the top is more it's more bigger, wider compared to the bottom. So we'll start from the top. So from the top you have the olecranon process, and then in here you have the trochlear notch, and then here you have the coracoid process right here, and then right besides it you have the radial notch, and then right below it this pointy projectile here is called the styloid process. So yeah, you also would have to know if it's a left or right bone for the ulna as well. And the way that I like to remember it is the way that the styloid process faces out. As you can see here, this is a right ulna, just because the styloid process is on the lateral side. And then next step, we'll talk about the radius. So the radius, there's only 3 landmarks you would have to know. So you have the head of the radius, and then this area is called the radial tuberosity, and then over here, this pointy part down here is called the styloid process. Some common injuries that happen, especially that are common in children, are that the ulna and the radius disarticulate from the humerus. So here, right here, they disarticulate from the humerus, and that's called a separated elbow. It's most commonly seen in children. A broken wrist is when there's fractures of the ulna and of the ulna and the radius. Especially when you reach at an angle, then this is known as a broken wrist. Another way that it's known as a broken wrist is when the scaphoid or the lunate fracture, and especially when you fall and you fall straight down, the impact that your hand absorbs ends up fracturing the scaphoid and the lunate, which is also known as a broken wrist. So this is a scaphoid bone. This one is closer to your thumb, and then the lunate is closer to your pinky, as you could tell here. The way I remember is that the scaphoid is bigger than the lunate, and kind of looks like a little thumb too, like the shape of it. So that's why I know that it's closer to the thumb, and it's a scaphoid. And then lunate's a bit smaller in size, and just remember that it's by the pinky. So next we'll talk about the metacarpals, which is this one, metacarpal 1, metacarpal 2, metacarpal 3, metacarpal 4, and metacarpal 5. These are pretty much like your knuckles. The way you'll spell it out, especially the numbers, is by using Roman numerals. So you'll put metacarpal 2, but in Roman numeral. And then the thumbs only have a proximal and a distal. They don't have a middle phalanx. So compared to this one has a proximal, a middle, and a distal. And the thumb doesn't. So you'll just go proximal phalanx 1, distal phalanx 1, and then for the other ones you'll just put proximal phalanx 2, middle phalanx 2, distal phalanx 2. Remember to always put position is in. Like for this one be proximal, this one be middle and distal, and then the what it is, so phalanx, and then you'll put the number in Roman numeral. And yeah, so this would be metacarpal, or sorry, not metacarpal, proximal phalanx 2, middle phalanx 2, distal phalanx 2. This one will be proximal phalanx 3, middle phalanx 3, distal phalanx 3. This will be proximal phalanx 4, middle phalanx 4, distal phalanx 4. And then this one will be proximal phalanx 5, middle phalanx 5, and then distal phalanx 5. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the upper limbs. So yeah, thank you.